U.S. History Final Exam Review, Spring 2024. Chapter 1, Post-World War II, Prosperity and Cold War Beginnings. Have you ever wondered how the U.S. emerged as a global superpower after World War II? The end of World War II marked a new era of prosperity and economic growth for the United States, with the GI Bill playing a pivotal role. This significant piece of legislation provided veterans with a host of benefits such as educational tuition, unemployment pay, and loans for homes and businesses. It was a catalyst for the expansion of the American middle class, fostering a sense of economic security and upward mobility that hadn't been seen before. But this time of prosperity wasn't without its tensions. As the world divided into ideological camps, the U.S. found itself embroiled in the Cold War, a contest of political and military might against the Soviet Union. This was a period marked by suspicion and fear of communism spreading within the country's own borders. The House Un-American Activities Committee, or HUAC, led the charge in rooting out suspected communist sympathizers, particularly in Hollywood. This resulted in the blacklisting of hundreds of alleged communist sympathizers without justification or proof under the era known as McCarthyism. At the same time, the Korean War raged on from 1950 to 1953 and would prove to be a significant conflict in this Cold War epic. North Korea's invasion of South Korea prompted a response from the United Nations led by the U.S. that aimed to halt the spread of communism. This war, while often overshadowed by other historical events, marked a significant escalation in the ideological battle that defined much of the mid-20th century, setting the stage for future confrontations in places like Vietnam. Chapter 2, Civil Rights Movements and the Space Race. But what was happening on the home front during this period? While the Cold War was brewing, America was also grappling with significant social changes. The Civil Rights Movement was a central theme of this time, with figures like Martin Luther King Jr. leading the charge. Dr. King, a tireless advocate for nonviolent protest and civil disobedience, was a beacon of hope and resilience in a time of deep-seated racial tension. His efforts culminated in being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964, a recognition that tragically preceded his assassination just 4 years later. Inspired by leaders like Dr. King, brave individuals were challenging racial segregation across the nation. The Little Rock Nine, a group of 9 African-American students, made history in 1957 when they attempted to desegregate an Arkansas high school. This act required federal intervention and underscored the societal and political significance of the civil rights movement. But amid the struggle for civil rights, America was also looking to the stars. The space race, sparked by the Soviet Union's launch of Sputnik on October 4, 1957, led to a surge of scientific advancements and national pride. In response to the Soviet Union's early lead, the United States established NASA and passed the National Defense Education Act, bolstering science and math education nationwide. This period of intense technological competition culminated in the successful Apollo 11 moon landing in 1969, marking a major victory for the United States. The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 brought the world to the brink of nuclear war and would set the stage for Cold War tensions that would last well into the 1980s. This tense standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union was eventually resolved through diplomatic agreements, leading to improved relations between the two superpowers. But it's also important to remember that in the face of adversity, America was both reaching for the stars and striving for equality. Chapter 3, The Great Society, Vietnam War, and Cultural Shifts. How did the U.S. tackle poverty, and what impact did the Vietnam War have on the nation? These questions guide our journey into the 60s, a decade marked by President Lyndon B. Johnson's ambitious social reform program, the Great Society. Johnson's vision sought to eliminate poverty and racial injustice, building a society that offered opportunities for all. Programs like Medicare and Medicaid were born from this vision, extending health insurance to the elderly and the poor, and fundamentally altering the nation's social safety net. But as Johnson was working to build a great society at home, he was also leading the nation into the Vietnam War, a conflict that would deeply divide the American public. The draft system, which conscripted young men into service, became a source of controversy and protest. As the war escalated, so did media coverage, bringing the harsh realities of combat into living rooms across the nation. Then, the Pentagon Papers scandal erupted, revealing government deception about the war's progress and further eroding public trust. This era was also one of significant cultural shifts, with music playing a powerful role in political and social activism. Artists like Bob Dylan and the Beatles used their platforms to question authority and promote peace, their lyrics echoing the sentiments of a generation seeking change. Among the political milestones of this era, the career of Shirley Chisholm stands out. Chisholm broke barriers as the first African-American woman elected to Congress in 1968, and she continued to shatter expectations by running for president in 1972. Her campaign, though unsuccessful, paved the way for future generations of diverse political leaders. A time of war abroad brought about significant changes at home, reshaping the American landscape. This period of American history, marked by social reform, conflict, and cultural revolution, laid the groundwork for the nation we know today. As we continue our journey through the past, we'll see how these events influenced the movements and milestones that followed. Chapter 4: Minority Movements and Environmental Awareness. Who were the other voices fighting for recognition, and what sparked the environmental movement? As America grappled with civil rights and the Vietnam War, other marginalized communities began to assert their rights. These minority movements, including Native American rights and special interest groups, added to the chorus for equality. Native Americans, for instance, sought recognition of their sovereignty and the preservation of their cultural heritage, leading to landmark legislation like the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act. But the struggle wasn't confined to Native Americans. Special interest groups representing diverse communities, women, Latinos, Asian Americans, LGBTQ+ individuals, and people with disabilities, also emerged, each advocating for their unique rights. They pursued legislative victories, societal acceptance, and an end to discrimination, making significant strides towards a more inclusive America. In tandem with these social shifts, a new consciousness was arising, an awareness of the environment. This was ignited by Rachel Carson's groundbreaking book, Silent Spring. Published in 1962, it exposed the devastating effects of pesticides on the environment, especially on birds. Carson's work was a wake-up call, illustrating how human actions could irreversibly harm our planet. Her book spurred public outcry and led to a ban on DDT, a commonly used pesticide at the time. Carson's work also catalyzed the formation of the Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA, in 1970. The agency's mission was to protect human health and to safeguard the natural environment, air, water, and land. The EPA was a significant step towards institutionalizing environmental protection and set the stage for future legislation like the Clean Air Act and the Endangered Species Act. In essence, the late 20th century saw the rise of voices that had long been silenced or ignored. As marginalized communities found their voice, America also began listening to the voice of the planet. The fight for civil rights expanded beyond human rights to include the rights of the planet. And so, America's journey towards greater inclusivity and environmental consciousness continued. As marginalized communities found their voices, America also began listening to the voice of the planet. Chapter 5: International Relations and Transition into the 21st Century. How did international relations shape America's global standing, and what marked its transition into the 21st century? As we delve into this, we uncover a fascinating narrative of diplomatic endeavors, economic trials, and technological advancements. Let's begin with President Nixon's groundbreaking visit to China in 1972, a diplomatic leap that thawed the chilly relations between the two nations. It was a game-changer, opening doors to an intricate symbiotic relationship that continues to shape global politics and economies today. But let's not forget the OPEC oil embargo in the 1970s that dealt a heavy blow to the U.S. economy. The embargo was a wake-up call, revealing America's vulnerability to foreign oil and prompting a shift towards energy independence. Fast forward to the 1980s and we find ourselves in the midst of the Iran-Contra scandal, a clandestine affair that tarnished America's global standing. This scandal, involving secret arms sales to Iran and the funding of Contra rebels in Nicaragua, was a stark reminder of the delicate balance between political strategy and ethical conduct in international relations. As we cross the threshold into the 21st century, we witness the controversial 2000 presidential election, a political drama that unfolded in the public eye and ended in a Supreme Court decision. This event underscored the importance of every vote and the intricate workings of our democratic process. Around the same time, the advent of the World Wide Web was revolutionizing every aspect of life. It was more than just a technological triumph. It was a societal transformation, connecting people and ideas in unprecedented ways. Then came the tragic events of September 11th, 2001. The U.S. response to these attacks redefined its foreign policy, focusing on counterterrorism and leading to significant military engagements in Afghanistan and Iraq. Finally, we reached the presidency of Barack Obama and the passage of the Affordable Care Act, a landmark set of healthcare reforms that broadened access to health insurance for millions of Americans. It was a testament to the ongoing struggle for equitable healthcare and a reflection of the nation's evolving social consciousness. But this piece of legislation has not come without its critics, who argue that it is too costly and, in some cases, may infringe on an individual's personal liberties because it requires individuals to carry health insurance. As we've seen throughout this school year, the history of the United States is a rich and complex tapestry of events and themes that have shaped the nation and its people. From the courageous and rebellious spirit of the Founding Fathers to the visionary and innovative leadership of the presidents, to the diverse and resilient movements of the citizens, the U.S. has been a force of change and progress in the world. But our history is also marked by contradictions and conflicts, such as the oppression and exploitation of Native Americans, African Americans, and other marginalized groups, the involvement and intervention in wars and conflicts around the globe, and the polarization and division of the political and social landscape. As we reflect on the events that have shaped this nation in the past, we should also look ahead to its future and ask ourselves, what kind of country do we want to be? What values and principles do we want to uphold? What challenges and opportunities do we face in the 21st century? How can we work together to create a more perfect union that respects and celebrates the diversity and dignity of all its people? These are some of the questions that your study of U.S. history invites you to explore and act upon.